Good evening. I'm sure after all this, it's clear that I'm going to talk about ISIS, or Daesh, as we call it in my region, the Middle East, or ISIL, as the Americans like to, or Islamic State, as I don't want to. And because if you say Islamic State, then to me, you actually recognize the fact that there is an Islamic State, and I do not. But let me tell you that I want to talk to you about ISIS and what they have in common to the refugees that are going to Greece, from Greece to Turkey, from Turkey to Europe. There is a clear connection. First of all, I'd like to tell you that ISIS didn't actually fall from heaven, or perhaps even better, from hell. It took a while. The group actually was already getting active in Syria in 2013 and 14, before they captured the second Iraqi city of Mosul in August 2014. So in Syria, they also had its own place, its own town called Raqqa. And in Raqqa, ISIS really started to gain momentum, to start its travel, its journey into the world. And here you see a sign that is actually not real. There is no sign saying this is the Islamic State, because although the Islamic State is now in Iraq and Syria, a territory where 8 million people live, it is not an actual state with borders where there is border crossings, etc. ISIS, that made the Islamic State, is really a combination of frustration and religion, of people seeking power and money, of civilians believing that religion can help them, that they can find everything they need in religion, and next to that, of a lot of opportunists. If you look at the origins of ISIS, then it goes back to the former dictator Saddam Hussein, who fell, who was taken from his reign by the Americans in 2013. On the picture, you see him holding a Quran. Now, what happened in the years before the fall of Saddam was that Iraq, because of the embargoes the world imposed on it, became very impoverished, and people, being poor, found refuge in religion. And Saddam, because he didn't want to lose them, also used religion to keep the people with him. And I remember that one day I was just after the fall of Saddam in Iraq in 2003, and I found this mosque outside Najaf. Najaf is the holy city of the Shiites. There's two main religious groups, two Islamic groups in Iraq, Shiite, Sunni. Sunni were with Saddam, minority. Shiite, against Saddam, majority. That mosque was built there in the time of Saddam, and it was used by Wahhabis. And Wahhabis is the most strict sect that we have in the Sunni Islam. What Saddam did was, at the same time that he allowed people to go to the mosque, and although he did make sure that he was looking at what they were doing and that his secret service was always there, he let the Saudis build a Wahhabi mosque. So the most strict Sunni sect was in the middle of the Shiite heartland. And in that way, religion already played a role in Iraq before ISIS ever appeared. But what happened is that because of the Wahhabis already being there, and because of the people being poor, they were very easy prey for the more conservative religions, the Salafi Islam. And on the picture behind me, you see another part of Saddam's rule that reminds us of ISIS now, what is the Fedayeen Saddam, which was a rather shady militia all dressed in black. And they were actually taught to fight until death followed. They did. In a couple of instances, they actually did. These people now are involved in training the ISIS militants, and they are also fighting with them. So they are very much involved, and they are not the only ones. It's not the only heritage of Saddam that you can find in ISIS today. Also, a lot of his politicians, a lot of his officers are involved. And if there was not only Saddam that made the mistakes, the bigger mistake perhaps even was made by the Americans when they came in 2003 and they decided to send the Iraqi army out. So what happened is that the moment you send away people who have been trained very well, people who have guns, and then they become frustrated, is that you have something you cannot control anymore. And these people, many of them, joined the resistance, first Al-Qaeda, later ISIS. Another thing was happening during the Americans. They had a prison system in which it was possible for the jihadis, so the people that were with Al-Qaeda at that time, and the Ba'athis that the new government was picking up, they would meet together in the prison, and there a lot of the former Ba'athi people were infected, and they became member of what later became ISIS. So for many of these Ba'athis, it wasn't just a matter of religion, although some of them did. They did convert, if you would put it that way. They did become Salafi. They did actually embrace the religion. But a lot of them, they just saw ISIS as a sort of Trojan horse, a way to get back to power in Iraq. And that's what they tried to do when they, in August 2014, captured Mosul, at the beginning of what we saw. So, an important point in ISIS is the frustration of the people that went to join them. And that also happened because the ruler that the Americans put after Saddam had been pushed out, Mr. Nouri al-Maliki, he decided to discriminate the Sunnis, the minority, because they used to be with Saddam, because he didn't trust them. That's the main reason. And he sent more Sunnis to prison and to the execution than any Shiite. And again, that also helped ISIS to attract people. If you look at what ISIS has in common with the society in the region, in Syria and Iraq, where they are mostly active, it is a religious conservative background in which honor is very important, in which the society is split over the gender line. This is a society where pornography and Viagra are used as nowhere else. And in ISIS, they're looking at the women as only wives and mothers. And they are trying to hide them behind the burqas that are now the thing that women have to wear. In ISIS, you must have seen it. What they did to women is incredible. 3,000 Yezidi women were captured, and many of them were held as sex slaves. And I've been wondering for myself, how can it be that something as dehumanizing as having slaves is considered as Islamic, and that people think that this is the right thing to do? When you look at what attracts people to ISIS, it is really not so much the fact that there is slaves or that there is violence. It's people that are vulnerable, that are not feeling well in their lives, that are looking for a vocation or a fulfillment in life, or they are simply looking for an adventure. Now, what I'm showing you here is one of the paintings that have been made afterwards of what happened to the Yezidis. And I'm sure these kind of images are not going to attract people to ISIS. Neither is this, but that is really what you see here. This is the execution of a large amount of Shiite by ISIS. It comes from a very simple vision of the world. It's us against them. It's Muslims against unbelievers. And for many of the people that are recruited, it's very easy to have that kind of a vision presented to them. ISIS promises the women, for instance, that they are going to be the models of the next generation. And for women, that's a status. That is an important thing. Men feel that they will leave the pain and the suffering of this earth to go to paradise. Now, paradise is what connects the refugees to the ISIS followers. They are really opposites, two sides of a coin. ISIS guys, they die to go to paradise. The refugees, they live in a paradise, they hope. Both want an end to violence. Usually the refugees want to study, they want to have a good life with a wife and kids, freedom to live without oppression, etc. For ISIS, the afterlife is one with women and sex. It's away from the rules and the regulations of the conservative society. So, two sides of the same coin, because the refugees flee from the violence that ISIS has caused. And they have the same background at the same time of the cultural, religious, and political suppression, and of longing for a better life. They all come from a society in which violence is used to suppress people. It's in which fear is used as a weapon. Many of them don't know any other way to solve problems than through violence. Now, we have seen the refugees flee to here, to Turkey, to my country. Kurdistan has 2 million. We know that they leave oppression and discrimination, that they leave the violence that killed their families, that often killed their future. And they want to be in a place where they feel safe. Some people see them as fortune seekers, but who would not want a better life after, if you cannot have a school or a job, you can only live in a violent situation. Racist groups are scaring people. They say that what we're really getting here are young guys who are going to molest and abuse our women. But I don't think that's true, although I'm showing you this picture because a lot of what is happening, of course, does have a sexual background. But for the people who flee, they wouldn't risk losing anything by molesting a woman. They want a new life. They want a new family here. They wouldn't take the risk of misbehaving in that way. Refugees come here to build a new life. They want to build themselves. They want to build the country. Now, very important also about the project of the paradise, the prospect of a paradise, is that ISIS is a group that is losing its people very much faster than any other group that is also out there, because they want their people to die to go to paradise. So that's how you lose your fighters much faster than when you get them to just fight and make sure that you survive. Now, I would like to call your attention to the fact that we perhaps could do something to end well, at least to start the end of the trouble with ISIS, and that is recruiting is a very important tool. And recruiting also happens in our societies. It's very important to tell young people, first of all, what ISIS is like, but secondly, what is the risk of being recruited? How can it happen? How does it happen? Because it happens. You have to tell them how recruiters work, that their stories are false. And I'm calling on all of you to start thinking about it, because I think it's an aspect that is not really very much covered at the moment. While if we stop the recruiting, if we stop ISIS from growing, it will eventually implode. It will eventually be able to stop. And if we stop ISIS, if we stop the Islamic State from being a powerful entity in Iraq and Syria, we can start solving the problems of Syria, and we can start solving the problems of refugees that Europe doesn't know what to do about. So let's try at least to get a start with that. And then perhaps we can have also people who will rise up against ISIS, because no longer ISIS is powerful enough to beat them, to execute them. So very, very important is to stop the recruiting and stop ISIS. That's my call for tonight. Thank you very much.